more information. So just wanted to be clear with that. Staff's not at a point to actually make a recommendation on this issue.
And Councillor Van Passen.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Through you, to Rita. I still have a problem trying to figure out why it takes so long to install a piece of pipe. There's a 30-inch pipe that's 6.1 kilometers away from Port Dover, and the timelines are 2 and 3 and 4 and 5 years to get that pipe in there. What else is involved rather than trenching a pipe into the ground?
Sorry, which are you referring to, the Nanticoke to Port Dover pipe?
Well, yeah, that's like it's 6.1 kilometers from where Nanticoke's existing pipe is in Haldimand to where Port Dover's existing pipe is in the East End in the subdivision. And why is the timeline so long to hook those two together? Like, I'm just a simpleton, but if Dover's short 2,500 cubic meters a day and Haldimand's got an extra 2,800 cubic meters surplus capacity today, and the pipes are only 6 kilometers apart, wouldn't take me long to figure out how to fix that. But I'm not an engineer, so.
All right, so just to give you some reference, we've estimated that the time construction for a pipe is only like 3 years. So it would be like 2022 through 2024 is when the actual design and construction would take place. But because it's currently 2021 and we wanted to give a buffer year for Norfolk County to sort out any legal or financial matters internally and with Haldimand County. So we've assumed that any work relating to this water supply, whether it's undertaking a Class EA or constructing a new pipeline, we assume that would not begin until 2022.
Because when I trenched a 6-inch line across my farm, and we did a half a kilometer in the afternoon of digging the trench, putting the pipe together, mounting the two hydrants on each end. And so I'm figuring you should be able to lay a kilometer of pipe in a week. It's then hard to design something that's 12 inches around and fits together. And yeah, maybe we're starting point is a year away from where I'd think I'd want to start this spring and have it done by fall, if that's a scenario. So I guess you've just built in extra time for us to make up our minds.
Yes, and I think, Mr. Chair, if I may, or my colleague Mazza here has something to say.
If I may, Mr. Chair, just to add on to what Rita responded to the councillor, this would also account for any studies that are required, like more detailed studies in advance of pushing in that pipe into the ground, as well as any additional pumping stations, which would be overground infrastructure that are required to meet that whole piece of infrastructure to be in a working condition. So there was a study done separately from this assignment to us. And I think they have looked at some of the additional infrastructure, but that'll give you a more detailed picture on everything that would be required to transfer the water from Haldimand to Norfolk. And this, of course, includes the construction. So you would be tendering it out, to a public contract and awarding it and going through the regular procedure of tender and construction. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Van Passen, is that you again? No. Thank you. Councillor Martin.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Through you to Rita. Thank you very much. That was a great presentation, and I found it very clear and concise and easy to follow. It answered a lot of my questions, and our staff has sent the actual presentation, so I will definitely be keeping that and saving it on file. But thank you for going through that so well. have a couple questions, and they may be well suited to staff as well, so just let me know if that's the case. But in your report on page 14, you talk about hybrid supplies and hybrid efforts. Can you go into that a little bit more and elaborate on that?
Are you referencing by any chance the section that talks about like WT infrastructures, the study they did for transmission mains and the pressurized supply?
Yes, it's listed in there. Yes.
Okay, so that study was actually provided to us, and that study was conducted by a separate consultant. So I think it's best if you could reference like the report, which I'm sure the staff have on hand, and they go into more detail about the different pressurized and hybrid options for the water mains there.
Okay, sure. Thank you. There was also a note on, or sorry, I was looking for more clarification. On page 18, you begin to reference the UV system. Can you explain to me if that, going through that process creates additional capacity, and how and why, and what the next steps are concerning UV?
Okay, so like very simply, basically, there's a disinfection system like that exists at the plant, and you can kind of think of it as like a tube. So at the beginning of a tube, the tube is where the disinfection system is. So right now there's chlorine, and across the tube there's a couple of different high lift pumps that are spaced out along the tube, and these high lift pumps would pump water from the treatment plant into the distribution system. And because there is a limited contact time between the disinfectant and the water, not all the high lift pumps can be used because not enough disinfection is achieved. So with the UV project, what would happen is we would replace the chlorination system with a UV system, which would kind of increase the disinfection, almost like a power, if you will. So it reduces the amount of time that the water needs to undergo disinfection, and that way you can use more of the pumps. You can turn out more water through that. And the disinfection system is what's limiting Port Dover's capacity right now, basically because you don't have enough disinfection capacity. You can't pump out more than 2.5 megaliters per day, which is not sufficient to meet Port Dover's current demands. So with the UV project in place, once the UV is installed, then you would be able to use one more of the high lift pumps that are there. So you wouldn't be installing any new high lift pumps. You would just moving one of them over so that you can use one of the ones that aren't being used right now. And that way you would be able to increase the firm capacity of the plant from 2.5 MLD to 4.9 MLD, just using existing pumps and a new UV system.
Okay, thank you very much. Page 19, you talk about the DAF units, and I did ask the question prior. I tried to go back and find the video and remember the specifics of it. I asked it to Mr. Godby, and I apologize to everyone if this is all familiar to you, but I can't recall the specific conversation about the DAF units and their role in capacity, because I was asked, could we not just put in more DAF units than we have already determined that we are putting in? And I believe Mr. Godby said no, but could you comment on that?
Yes, so basically, a water treatment plant has a number of different treatment processes that need to be done on the water before it can go into the distribution system. And so one of them is clarification, and one of the other ones is disinfection, like the UV one we were just talking about. The DAF units were installed because the clarifier, the existing one, there's only one at the Port Dover plant, is expected to reach end of life by 2022. So if that one were shut down, then the Port Dover plant would have zero capacity. So the DAFs were intended to replace the clarifier. So that would only solve the clarification issue and not the disinfection issue, which is another thing that's limiting plant capacity. And I think Jason Godby has his hand up.
Thank you, Rita. Through you, Mr. Chair, I see Mr. Godby's hand is raised.
Go ahead, Jason.
Yes, thank you. Through you to Councillor Martin. Yes, around that issue was primarily the discussion was the number of units and the total flow that the actual DAF units could put out. And that's where, with what we've approved, or what council has approved so far for that DAF project, we will be installing 2 units, which provide the ability to treat the water coming in to meet current needs, but not full build-out needs of Dover. If we need to get to that point, we need to add a 3rd unit, and that has been worked into the whole overall engineering, planning, and design that WSP has completed for these DAF installations, with the intention that should we have chosen, or should we choose to go down the road of doing a major rehabilitation of the Port Dover water treatment plant, and we want to do a capacity increase, it's just a matter of ordering the 3rd unit and having it built and installed and plumbed in line with the 2 that we're doing right now, which are meant to meet our current needs.
Thank you, Mr. Gobby. Mr. Chair, I have a bunch more, but maybe I'll ask one more and then pass it along if someone else would like to join in. Through you, Mr. Chair, would be on page 37 of the big report. It mentions that Norfolk County should clarify our usable storage. Have we done that yet and firmed up that?
Oh, I see, like, that's regarding Simcoe and Port Dover storage. Is that correct?
Yes.
Yes. Well, I don't know. We have not received clarification on the actual usable storage, but I believe in the report it states that the volume difference is fairly small, or at least for Simcoe, it's fairly small, but we have not received clarification on that yet.
Okay, thank you very much. Mr. Chair, I can take a break and let someone else have that.
I don't know if I have anyone else wishing to speak right now. Councillor Martin, I think you could go ahead.
Okay, thank you very much. Through you, I was asked the question, would it not be beneficial, or would it be a viable option for Port Dover to upgrade its treatment plant? And I'm not speaking just financially, but if we were looking to isolate Port Dover for the sake of lifting the development freeze, if we were to work on Port Dover and fix our issues there, why couldn't we just have a second elevated tank for storage purposes?
You mean adding, when you say isolating Port Dover, as in Port Dover would just supply itself and have like its own, it already has an elevated tank. From a storage perspective and per the ISMP, there is no storage deficiency, I believe, in Port Dover. So the storage problem, like that's not really what's limiting the Port Dover system right now. It's the treatment and production capacity.
Yes, thank you. No, I do understand that. But if we were to address those treatment capacity issues, the email was, why don't we isolate Port Dover and have a second storage facility, and then find a way to make Port Dover the location that shares water throughout the county through that second storage system. And then you're not in a position where you're sharing water or purchasing water or becoming a customer elsewhere.
Mr. Chair, could you defer to my colleague Mazza here?
Yes, that'd be fine. I see he had his hand raised. Go ahead, Mazza.
Thank you, Chair. So in terms of the water treatment plant in itself, if we go back to the slide where Rita was talking about the overall deficiencies in the water treatment plant, I think this was slide number 28. You will see that there are 3 major deficiencies with the clarification, disinfection and high lift pumping and filtration. But also there's talk about the addition of backwash supply tank. Could take 2 forms. You are absolutely right. If we put in a second elevated tank, that will take off the burden of the single elevated tank being the the sole source of supply for the backwash water. But it will not solve the other objective of the study, which was to link the communities. So if you look at it from an overall perspective, you are adding in more storage, and that will solve the issues within Port Dover, and that system could become overall in a better shape. But when you look at how you want to link to the other communities, is then when you have to look at the overall picture. So back to the technical evaluation. In some cases, some of those alternatives are higher ranked in the technical, but overall are ranked lower because of the weighting provided to the others. But this is something that is something that the county needs to comment on if the weightings provided are what is most important to the county.
Okay, thank you very much. No, that's helpful. I'll pass along that. I think that you have touched on the questions I have, and the remainder of my questions I can send to staff. So again, I want to just thank you. I think that was a very easy to follow presentation. A lot of information, but I really appreciate it.
Thank you, Councillor Martin. Councillor Mayor Chop, do you have something?
Yeah, just for Councillor Martin, those options, that option specifically was referenced in the presentation under the options 1 of looking at the Port Dover expansion that she referenced. So I think, again, that's already fit into the evaluation matrix. One of the things, I guess the only question that I would have, that NPV value is driven largely by operational costs for 2.2, 2.3, with Haldimand County. Can you just comment on how you arrived at those figures? And that's where I think that there is still there's still room to move on those to lower that NPV value.
Yes, for sure. And you are entirely correct. The NPV is driven by what we've called the operational cost on slide 32, which does include the purchase rate of water from Haldimand. And again, so the purchase rate for Haldimand County was taken from the rate study that was conducted by Watson. So there is a separate report for that. And that report details how the rate is calculated, which included things like life cycle costs, operating costs, and some overhead costs that would be required for Haldimand County. So that one will break it down for you kind of item by item, how they got the cost of each kind of line item and how they got to the total in the end.
I don't want to put you on the spot. Do you have any feeling on those, on the breakdown of some of those with admin costs and so on?
Do I have to comment? I'm going to just decline to comment.
You don't want to, that's okay. But I think that's why staff is looking for a couple months here just for council's perspective so they understand our negotiations with Haldimand, and that ultimately what we're looking to do there is to reduce those operational costs. And I think that one of the, the biggest thing to point out in this report is that, the challenge of Norfolk County, we're sitting here with 5 separate water and wastewater treatment systems with only 14,000 users on those systems. And ultimately, we can no longer continue to look at this as just a Port Dover problem or just a Waterford problem or just a Simcoe problem when each of those communities are being rated currently at medium to high risk. No one is more important than the other at this point in time. And, the other concern that I have when you look at expediting, okay, yes, one solution looks at expediting something a year ahead of the other solutions. But remember that it's those current users on the system that are going to bear those additional costs. So, yes, sometimes we say growth pays for growth, but arguably that's not always the case. And in this, situation, I think there's an element of fairness to users on the system that also have to be considered. Sorry, Jason, I cut you off there. Go ahead.
No, because we stopped in time. I was going to say that if we were going to get into discussion matters with regards to negotiations with Haldimand, I'd ask council to go on camera with that. So both WSP and yourself cut yourself off, so it's all good.
I was just being a little bit cheeky on purpose. Sorry. I just, for me, I have some concerns with those numbers that I'm seeing, but again, I think that's the recommendation or the ask from staff, from council, is to give them a 2-month window here to be able to go back and see where that takes us.
And I see Councillor Rabbits.
Thank you. Through you, I just have one final line of questioning for our deputation. I am on that slide. I'm back on 32 where we have our cost estimates. And I just like a bit further of an explanation about alternative 2.3 and the $69 million figure there highlighted in green. In addition to that, I would like just another comment about our options in option 2, and we have 2 proposals for a 2-pipe system, and there was 1 for 1, and I want just a little bit of feedback about the 2 versus 1 pipe into our community if we were to connect to Haldeman, please.
Okay, so let me first start off with the 1 versus 2 pipe scenario. So there are a couple advantages of having 2 pipes over 1. One is supply redundancy and security. So if you were to supply Simcoe and Waterford through Townsend, then that would kind of have, if you will, kind of almost an independent supply from what's happening in Port Dover. So if something were to happen in the Nanticoke to Port Dover, like that pipeline, that would not impact the supply up in Simcoe, Waterford, and so supply redundancy and security is a good option there. And the other advantage is kind of in terms of timeline, you can connect if you're doing 2 connections, you can kind of choose which communities to receive supplementary supply from Nanticoke first. So you could either go to Simcoe or to Port Dover, depending on what the county's priorities are. But if you're only doing 1 connection, and based on the data that we have, it would be from Nanticoke to Port Dover, then forcibly Port Dover would have to be the first one to receive Nanticoke supplementary supply. So that's kind of the benefit of having 2 over 1 pipe connection. So now if we go to slide 32, I can briefly go over what was included in each of these capital costs and NPV costs here. So for the capital costs, the first row says Norfolk Water Treatment Plant. So this would be anything like water treatment plant upgrades or construction of new water treatment plants that would be done within Norfolk County borders. So this would either be construction of a brand new treatment plant in Port Dover and or upgrading Port Rowan. So for the purposes of this costing, we've assumed that Port Rowan would get a new intake because that would help solve some of the shallow intake and kind of algae problems that Port Rowan has experienced. The transmission mains and booster stations, again, this would be things that are located within Norfolk County borders. And then other would be things like Class CAs and studies supporting studies like that. So the capital cost really only includes things that are within Norfolk County borders. And then the capital cost NPV, again, is just the NPV of the capital cost that we showed above. And then the operational cost NPV would be the operational cost, as in the treatment cost for alternatives 1.2 and 1.3. And for alternatives 2.2, 2.3, 2.4, the operational cost includes the purchase rate from Haldemand and the debt of constructing new infrastructure upgrades within Haldimand County borders. And this was because of the Watson study, which had assumed that Norfolk County would be bearing 100% of the cost of any infrastructure upgrades that's required to bring water from Haldimand into Norfolk, even if it is located within Haldimand County borders. So this would be, there's 2 little segments of transmission main that would go that would be between Nanticoke and the Haldimand-Norfolk border, and the little segment between Townsend and the border there. And then with regards to the Nanticoke treatment plant upgrades, there was a certain percentage that Norfolk would pay, and this had to do with how much water Norfolk would be using. So again, that you can look into the Watson study for more information on how exactly they split it up. And that's why the operational cost of alternative 2.2 through 2.4, they're higher. One, because the purchase rate of the rate of purchasing treated water from Haldimand is higher than producing its own treated water, and also because it includes some of the buried capital costs.
Thank you. And Mayor Cha?
You're muted.
Thanks. Sorry. I guess just one final question for you, Rita. 14,000 users with 5 separate water and wastewater, 3 of which you're rating at supply issues having, being at a high or medium to high risk. One plant in particular that's operating at an almost 50% capacity deficit, another that is trending that way in the coming couple of years. Do you often experience this with municipalities? Or is this one of the more complex water management issues that you've come across?
Mr. Speaker, can I defer to Maza?
Yes, go ahead, Maza.
And I guess let me build on that even more in terms of how many years ago, would you agree that we're years behind here? I mean, this plan should have been in place several years prior to this council arriving on the scene.
Thank you, Honourable Chair. So I don't think you're in a unique problem, to be honest. You have quite a big area, and the population is quite spread out in those areas. So decentralized systems, which is what you currently have, and that's why you have so many, is not uncommon. In fact, I think it would be what would be preferred in most cases. I think in terms of your overall issue, it's not just the quantity, but you're having quality issues as well. From some of the groundwater sources, that the quality is now being compromised, and that's why it has to be supplemented with surface water, because you can't get enough groundwater in those areas. So what I would say is the preferred option would be a decentralized system where you have these smaller treatment plants providing water to their own localities, and that's not uncommon. But the longer term water quality issue is forcing us to move to this larger scale one supply coming from the lake.
Mr. Chair, if I can, I guess, my concern is we're not predicting the situation in Port Dover. I mean, to me, we're years past a solution in Port Dover. Would you not agree, given the development that we've seen occur? I don't think, yes, some communities do have to impose a development moratorium, but I guess that's where my concern lies. I mean, we have a lot of developers that are, are justifiably frustrated and ticked off, and I don't think that it's fair that it's at the hands of this council in any way when again, we've had to stop development in Port Dover. We're seeing challenges in Simcoe, and I guess this is where I understand again their frustrations, but I think we're in the year 2021 now. We still have 3 towns that are operating on a ground water system. And yet, the advantage that we have in Norfolk County, that many other municipalities that would be operating on these centralized facilities like this, they don't have the same proximity to a Great Lake that we also enjoy. And with Haldeman, that has been talked about for years and years. And I guess, I want to commend this council and you guys for coming forward. And finally, we're getting to the point of having a solution here that's going to take Norfolk, years into the future. And that's where I think, again, just to reiterate back from the question earlier about simply looking at Port Dover or so on, because that's what's most critical right now, that we have to remember as a council, we can't continue to look at these problems in isolation.
No, I agree with you, and I hear what you're saying. I think you are right. There could be some alternatives that could have been looked at previously. I don't think I can comment on decisions that have been made previously, but I think in any case, we are where we are right now. We are looking forward with the alternatives that we have. I think the best option for the county going forward is what I think we would all be looking for.
Thank you, Maza. Any other questions from committee? Okay, seeing none. Rita and Maza, I would like on behalf of committee to thank you very much for your excellent and very straightforward, easy to follow presentation today. And I'm sure that that information will be of tremendous use to this council. Thank you. We will now follow that up with a staff report. That'll be PW 21-11 regarding the path forward for Norfolk County's water supply. I understand that Mr. Godby will be giving this report. Jason, whenever you are ready.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. I hope everyone can hear me well enough. It doesn't really bother me if you don't see me, but as long as you can hear what I have to say, it's all good. So staff report PW 21-11, I guess I'll just preface it all with echoing some of the comments that Mr. Burgess had made at the start prior to the WSP presentation, which I'll echo your comment, Councillor. Very well done, Mazza and Rita, if you're still listening, thank you. The path forward for Norfolk County's water supply is a complicated one, to say the least. As you sat through the presentation, you can see we have a number of varying issues in varying communities, and we are trying to achieve a balance that looks after the long-term safety and security of supply for the county while still looking what are some things that we can do quickly in order to address some of these concerns that have been brewing over some years. So without getting too far back into the work that WSP has done on the interurban water supply study and the feasibility really of doing some interconnections in our communities and giving us that high level look at what do we need to do in order to achieve a fully interconnected system across Norfolk County that it is sustainable in the long run. I guess I feel like unless somebody wants to back me up, some of the I'll jump to it looks like page 83 of our agenda, where we look at the moving forward section of the staff report. So as Mr. Burgess indicated, we are not looking for a council endorsement of option 1.2 or 2.3 or 2.4 or any of that today. As you can understand, there are a lot of factors here that still need to be a little bit further refined, I think, before we can sit down and comfortably tell or request of council a direction on any of these. And so the number one of those, I won't say the number one, in no particular order, the first one I will speak to, I will say, is looking to finalize some more of an agreement with Haldeman County and firm up those details of what that actually means for us to become a very large volume water purchaser from them. That in itself can have some significant impact on what was identified in the IUWS as the operating costs, that 2020 to 2041 horizon, those values that were identified. Basically, we've got some proposed numbers from Haldeman based on the rate study that they did. There is an agreement in principle from Haldeman to sell us water. The direction to Haldeman staff so far has been to look at bringing back to Haldeman Council a draft agreement with Norfolk. And at the same time, that is what we are asking of this council, is to provide that direction to staff. Give us 60 days to turn around and make sure that we are all on the same page and we are comfortable with what we would be committing ourselves to as a long-term, large volume customer from Haldeman. So that's one of the points I'd like to move forward with. Tied to that would be the continuing to work with Haldeman on future funding potential for a project of this magnitude. One of the things that we do have with this situation, with what Haldeman is trying to achieve with the potential expansion of their facility, it is a large-scale project with multi-partners. Those things typically bode well when it comes to funding. So we want to continue to explore that. Some potentially good funding here could drastically improve our financial state as we look at these options. However, it is very important to note that we did not proceed with any of the financial analysis, making any assumptions that we would be getting anything. This is basically, if we need to fully fund this ourselves, that is how everything's been structured. One of the keys that Rita touched on through her presentation was looking at a detailed impact analysis of blending water sources. The fact of the matter remains that in any scenario where we will be looking to blend a water source, whether that's two groundwater sources in the case of, say, Delhi and Simcoe being blended together, or two lake water sources in the scenario of Nanticoke and Port Dover being blended together, or a lake source and a groundwater source, which we were briefly told is definitely the least preferable of the blending scenarios. Water chemistry and quality analysis needs to be performed. Basically some jar testing, samples from each distribution system to see what that effect of blending is going to be. Primarily on what is that going to have as a water quality effect on the overall distribution system. Significant changes in levels of hardness or pH or alkalinity can wreak havoc on a distribution system. You all may be loosely aware of everything that went on with Flint, Michigan when they changed water sources. We definitely don't want to go down that road. And we're going to be doing some due diligence on getting some of that analysis done. That two ongoing projects that we've had on the go also warrant additional discussion that was not able to be fully captured inside the IUWS, and the need to get that in front of council and get this report finalized and get the ball rolling a little more, and getting that messaging out to the community, as well as to the fact of what is actually brewing in the background. The Simcoe Northeast well was referenced, and the Simcoe Northeast well is been a Norfolk County project that's been in the works since 2008. It's been held up at various aspects across the timeline since 2008. However, this council may recall that it was this council that approved the award to be doing our actual well testing there and looking at having the well drilled and the further development of that. We have done a 7-day pumping test of that well, which included a great deal of other groundwater monitoring in the area. Our hydrogeologist is right now working on compiling that data and bringing forward his final report on what the potential yield of that well could be. The preliminary numbers we've heard, I won't state anything today because I don't want to eat those words. But it looks promising that if this well can be developed and a pipeline run, it could be a significant water source, supplemental water source for Norfolk County, which we have previously invested in. So we are anticipating that within the span of the next month to two, that we will have that final report. We already have the open active capital project for any the final development and construction should that become a viable option for the county. And we want to be able to bring that information back for council to discuss and see how that fits into our overall water needs. Concurrently to that, because of some of the water quality and quantity issues that we have had in Simcoe relating to that system, is we have a hydrogeologist who has been doing some work and looking at what optimization work we might be able to do to some of our existing wells, recognizing that there may be some additional potential for increased water out of the ones that are there that are still good. So that is a report that, again, we're looking at, coming to in the next month to month and a half. Tied to that, we've also been looking at more specifically some of the needs for the Port Rowan water treatment plant, recognizing it's not as urgent or not as upfront as some of the discussion has been surrounding Port Dover. However, we are anticipating some future challenges there. So we have engaged a team to look at Port Rowan and whether or not we feel that we have the resources available currently, meaning we do have an open active capital project for some rehab work of that treatment facility, to know whether we have the right path going forward for Port Rowan, or whether we need to take another look at things. Again, information that is coming in the next couple of months. And finally, one of the bits that is probably of some of the most significant interest and potential immediate impact would be some of the work that has been done related directly to the Port Dover water treatment facility. And that being, we've all referenced the high lift pumping and UV upgrades. That project that was initiated back in 2018, subsequently put on hold in order to address our clarification concerns. But there's been some engineering done on that already. The base of a lot of what we would need for any kind of capacity increase at Port Dover is there. And some of that work, because of the current state that it's in, could potentially happen even a little quicker than what has been initially noted in the interurban water supply report. Now, that being said, we are also wanting to pull all that together so that essentially 2 months from now, we would be back videoing with council in order to bring forward what do we have for a good deal or not good deal with purchasing water from Haldeman. Are we coming forward with any good news regarding the Simcoe developments, the Simcoe water capacity developments that have been ongoing for a while? Meaning, are we going to or will we easily and quickly develop this northeast well or not? Is there capacity within our existing wells in Simcoe to improve our situation there or not? What is a tightened up, more realistic timeline for potential capacity expansion of Port Dover? And tied to all of these options is needing for us to be able to initiate any of the other plan updates that might be required. Because right now our current water and wastewater master plan is the 2016 Integrated Sustainable Master Plan. And the current direction from that master plan was for the utilization of local upgrades and interconnections of communities. So for us to stray from that, we do need to update our master plan. It's not a completely overwhelming task. However, it is something that needs to be done. And regardless of which way we're going to be going, it is now 5 years out of date, and it is not necessarily reflective of the current situation that we are in anyways. So staff needs to get that done. Beyond that, I think I've covered generally what are our recommendations out of this current staff report for our path moving forward and to give us some marching orders for the next 60 days so that we can then resume this conversation looking for a little more firm recommendation as to which direction we are going and how we're going to get there. So all of that being said, I know I didn't get into many of the technical details. If you have those types of questions, we are glad to answer them, whether that is today or offline in the future. I know that the 150 pages of information prepared by WSP is a lot to digest. The Councillor Martin noted that it was late being posted to the web, but it is out there. For those who maybe looked at the November of 2020 posting that was on the internet, the first, I believe, 7 chapters are largely the same, very minor tweaks that were made. And any of those technical questions, we are glad to look into and discuss more. This all being said, I apologize, I need to back myself up just to talk a little bit more about the current ongoings with Haldimand County. And 2 big points, I guess, to highlight here are that we know through conversations with staff there that they are looking at they have an approved project for initiating the master plan update that they require in order to expand the water treatment plant at Nanticoke. And additionally to that, they are further exploring what in-plant optimizations they can do in order to squeak more capacity out, which would give us potential for more immediate water out of that facility. The WSP report and Haldimand Council to this date have confirmed that they can give us, are willing to sell us right now 2,800 cubic meters of water per day as quickly as we could build a pipeline and negotiate an agreement for that purchase. They are going through a process whereby they are going to see if there is additional capacity that can be pushed out of that facility. If so, we would then need to know what is that value and what would that rate be as well. So it's all kind of tied together. But we are, I believe, and many of the staff who have put a lot of hard work and time and effort into getting this information moving and compiled, and at least in a form that we can start to have some meaningful discussion about it. We all believe that in a matter of 2 months, we will be in a much better position with a lot more detailed information to continue these discussions. So this time, with all of that, I will cut myself off and gladly do my best to address any questions that any of you have today.
Thank you, Jason. Questions of committee, Councillor Rabbit.
Thank you, and through you, thank you for the opportunity to start us off here. I'm hearing a little bit of an echo, but I'll proceed. Maybe if we could get others' mics on mute might assist, but I'll continue. Through you to Jason, I had asked you an unfair and difficult question several meetings ago. I don't know if you recollect when I asked you if, a short-term solution would jeopardize, a longer-term vision or a longer-term solution in a world with finite resources and only one pie to draw from. I really did want to hear from staff if potentially having an interim solution or a solution that is quick and expedient, specifically to alleviate the condition in Port Dover firstly, and the impending situation in Simcoe with water, if that would jeopardize the longer term vision, the big solution. We only have so much resources and we can only have so many grant proposals potentially, approved from higher levels of government for this project. I asked you an unfair question, and you've had some time to prepare. If you don't have that answer for me today, I'd be hoping to hear that answer in a future report. That's my first hardball for you, and I'm sorry, my friend, I don't have any softballs this evening. I have one more question for you after you attempt that one.
Yes, through the chair to Councillor Rabbits. You ask a very good question. I don't believe that there is any option in which has been discussed by staff, by the IUWS and WSP engineers, or anyone that is really going to jeopardize anything. And the reason I say that is ultimately one of the things that we have noted, and one of the ultimate goals of the long-term vision for Norfolk County's water system is partially the interconnectivity of communities. So, to put it very bluntly, if we were able to do some interconnections and make our communities sustainable on their own with our existing groundwater supplies, I think that would be a good thing. Lsaa kind of indicated that through one of the questions that was asked of him earlier. I and many others do have significant concerns with whether or not we have the ability to do so. Whether we can, when we're talking about taking 12 years to turn around a groundwater well development in Simcoe, it can be done, but it is a very long process. Water treatment plant intakes into the Great Lakes are a significant time investment as well. The amount of time and engineering and approvals that need to go into anything that involves that shoreline work and water taking of these magnitudes will take some time, and that is a risk, and that was something that was talked about in the IUWS. One of the risks identified was the fact that we are kind of chaining our horse to someone else's buggy. And I appreciate concern that may be around that. But if you're looking at the long term, in my opinion, even if you construct all your community interconnectivities and you switch the tap over to Haldeman, and we're a fully serviced municipality by Haldeman County. And we have the long-term 20-year plan of remaining that way. There is nothing stopping us from also continuing to look at the construction of our own centralized plant and eventually getting out of that agreement. The interconnectivity of the communities would allow us to do that, whether we end up buying water from one source or another, or we're pumping it from the ground again or whatever. Those options remain available to us. So I don't have a very short answer for you, obviously, but it's not like anything we do at this time is going to hurt us in the long. I do firmly believe that we could be losing out on growth potential by not developing a solution to the short-term problem as expeditiously as possible.
Thank you, Jason. And Mr. Chair, if I may, through you, I really appreciate your candor with us and your honesty, Jason. I think our community needed to hear that information from you. I do see Brandon Sloan has had his hand raised, and he may have some additional information to provide if we could go to him.
Thanks. The chair is muted, but I assume the chair is okay if I can help supplement my friend, Mr. Godby.
Yes, go ahead, Brandon. I'm sorry I was on mute. Thank you.
Thanks, and I'll be brief. And it's been a lot of years since I've been a hardball player, more of a slow pitch player. But it's a key question. From my perspective, having a long-term plan for water security and availability, it's going to be critical for growth and for economic development. Like, we're poised for a lot more development to happen in Norfolk and a lot more great things to come. But it's really tough for us to go and promote that and regenerate downtowns and realize all the things that we can be without water. So I would just implore you upon us collectively, I guess, as we're going through this, that how critical it's going to be to negotiate through this kind of big challenge that we have. There are ways we can look at to stage development into the future, but we can't do it piecemeal. We've got to have one overall long-term plan that makes the best balance and makes the most sense, and then we can consider our future growth. Thanks.
Thank you, Brandon. Other questions of committee? Mayor Chop.
Can I move the staff recommendation, please?
So moved, and Councillor Martin, is that a second?
No, I still have a question.
Okay. You go ahead.
I've moved a motion.
Thank
I'm
you,
sorry,
Mr.
Mayor
Chair.
Chop.
Through you.
I'm sorry, Councillor Martin. I'm just going to look for a seconder for the motion before we discuss.
And then we go to debate.
Yes, okay, thank you. Councillor Huffman, are you seconding? Thank you. So we have second discussion debate. Councillor Martin?
Thank you. No debate at this point in time, just a question through you to Mr. Godby. The numbers have fluctuated, and you did make a comment on it early right out of the gate. I wondered if you could quickly just clarify. There has been comments about after Haldeman rates their 400 cubic meters all the way up to 5,800 additional cubic meters very quickly. Do you have confirmation on any one of those numbers, or are we unsure?
Thank you, Councillor Martin, through the chair to you. On staff report on the page, what is it, 84? Sorry, I'm just looking for it. No, page 83. You'll note that I have also heard of some other varying numbers out there. For clarity, first of all, we say that currently Norfolk Haldimand County is committed to 2,800 cubic meters to Norfolk County. Pending the results of their re-rating, if the plant is capable of achieving it, off the top, I have been advised that they may be able to provide up to 5,800. That is from staff at Haldimand directly, not through other channels where I've heard some other numbers coming around. And that is not 58 additional, that is 58 total. So 2,800, which is committed to already by Haldimand Council, plus up to an additional 3,000 based on some of these preliminary talks with Haldimand staff. And that would be one of those details that we would be coming back with to know exactly how their re-rating exercise went and how the negotiation of an agreement of purchase of water with Haldimand goes.
Okay, no, that is actually better than the specific number. I was wondering if that was in addition to or if that was the equal sum, so that is helpful. My other question to you is, in this 60 days, would you be able to bring back council, there is some information, I think it's page 101, 103 in the big study from the WSP study. Would you be able to put together, maybe it's once we get narrowed down a bit more with our options, but a bit of a Gantt chart for council, dates and times of what's projected to be happening in the construction phase and what's projected to be happening in the financial phase at that point in time, so that we'd be able to see, as we narrow down to better options, where we're projected at and what we can anticipate should be happening within a particular 4 or 6 month window.
Through the chair to Councillor Martin, I think that is something we can definitely work towards. Some of that information has been covered off already by WSP with some of their multicolored, multi-line charts, and I appreciate it's a lot of information, whatever, but we can definitely bring back, some of that information with perhaps some of the tweaks that able to make or updates based on some of the new information.
Yeah, that would be greatly appreciated through the chair. There is some information, you're right, I think it's page 101 or 103. When I printed it all off, it's all mixed up, so I reference it back and forth on my iPad. But if we could get, as we get narrowed down a little bit closer to something like that with additional commentary from staff and Haldimand and so on as we go, would definitely be very beneficial to me. Thank you.
Through the chair, just to, and maybe we'll go offline with Councillor Martin, but there is timelines provided on page 79, 80, and 81 of the report of the 3 shortlisted items. So maybe offline, once you look at those, if there's additional information you require, then we'll certainly provide that.
Thanks, Mr. Burgess. I do have it here, but like I said, when I printed it, it's all separate. So as things grow and change, I would appreciate something maybe a bit more compacted in one spot that I can reference.
Councillor Rabbits.
Thank you, and through you, I'd like to take this opportunity to speak to the motion. I am in support of staff's recommendation. I did have a second hardball for you, Jason, and you won't be able to escape it. And I know that you're not going to shy away from the challenge, but I think that our council and our community does need to really understand better how we've arrived at this situation. We've been de-amalgamated in a sense. We were once a region that had amalgamated services, both health and social services, as well as harder services such as water. And with the separation of these two communities, we found ourselves resource poor in some areas, and unfortunately for us in those areas, there's areas where Haldimand is resource rich and vice versa. Our friends in Haldimand have asked for more representation in some of the softer services that we provide to them and are often the decision makers in. But from a perspective on hard services, when we're looking at water, when we're looking at the issue that's before us today, perhaps you can provide us with some more information about, why is it that we have the capacity in Haldeman? We have this this town, Townsend, that was once going to have a 4-lane highway and was once going to be a city, and we built all this capacity at that time as a region. Now we're 2 counties, and I think it speaks a lot to that comment you made about interconnectivity. I really do see an investment in Haldeman and in hard services benefiting us, because that's where the capacity is, and with a minor upgrade, we make up that deficit, being resource poor in a specific area. Infrastructure, hard services. The industry, they don't have the agriculture. We've got the population, they do not. And there's this give and take between our 2 communities, and I think we need to find out a little bit more, both for the benefit of this council and for the public. Why is it so that we've arrived at this point where it's the most viable option I see is partnering with Haldeman, basically to regionalize a service that was de-amalgamated. That's just my layman's perspective. I'm sure that you have some thoughts on that topic.
Through the chair to Councillor Rabbits, that is a very loaded question that I don't necessarily feel 100% in the right in trying to explain, other than I can give the perspective of staff. You go back to looking at when I talk about 2008, trying to start drilling a new well source for Simcoe. It's not long after that we started some work in explorations around Port Rowan. That is around 2010 when we started some explorations around Delhi. We've had on the books for a while some things with Waterford, and in our long-term capital forecast we have some new water source identified there. I feel like we've been looking and have been fumbled up along the way the odd time for various reasons. Ultimately, you are correct. Our neighbor next door has the big plant, which was built initially to be a regional water supply to feed Haldeman and Norfolk, to Brantford, Regional Waterloo, the First Nations groups along the way if they wanted to. So the province, when they built that facility, had that vision, and for whatever reasons that definitely far predate me, they those never came to fruition. And for whatever reasons they are, it's at least got us in a position now where, on the path looking forward, we can try and take advantage of what could potentially be a valuable resource or asset to us, and maybe see some of that through. It is definitely an economy of scale situation, which could be beneficial to the county, provided that the proper agreements and rates are established, and a good working relationship made with our neighbors to the east. And those are the kind of things that, on this path forward, we want to bring back for council and the residents of Norfolk.
Thank you, Jason. Any other discussion or debate? The staff recommendation has been moved. Anything else from committee? In hearing none, we will put the staff recommendation to a vote. I don't think we need to record this one. I will just do it visually today. All those in favor of the staff report? And that is carried. Thank you very much. I'm going to suggest to committee that we take a break. It's currently 6 o'clock on the button. I'm going to propose that we take a break until 6:20, unless council or committee has an objection to that. Okay, thank you. We will return at 6:20. Thank you. Welcome back, everybody. I believe that committee is ready to resume. It appears we have quorum. I am hopeful that Councillor Huffman and Mayor Chop will join us very shortly, but I would like to carry on with the staff reports that we have. We'll begin with item 7A, staff report PW 21-10 regarding the wastewater services extension. I believe that'll be Mr. Godby presenting this report. Jason, whenever you are ready, I believe we are.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. If you just give me 1 second to find the report in front of me here in this package. However, what I can say is the purpose of this report has come by as a result of our recent attempts to issue an RFP with regard to finding a not necessarily a new, but putting the operations and maintenance of our county wastewater treatment facilities back out for contract renewal. We started this process through 2020. A draft went out. Through that, we had a number of questions and concerns through that procurement process. And essentially where we're at is it's required a significant amount of time and effort from staff in operations, as well as our legal and risk management and purchasing folks, in order to address some of the concerns that have come up. And we are requesting with this report 2 things. One being the authority to execute a 3-month extension with our current provider, which is Veolia Water Canada, in order to ensure that we get this RFP right and we have all of the various technical and legal contractual concerns properly addressed before we enter into another multi-year, multi-million-dollar agreement for the operation of our facilities. And secondly, as this council may be aware, or is aware, there's a request to adjust the county's indemnification clause, specifically in our agreement with this proposal, based on limited liability and reciprocal indemnification. That is an item that I will have to defer to Ms. Darlington or her staff a little more on if there are specific details relating to that. But that was one of the major items for discussion with the RFP as we've been going through that process. So really what we're asking for today is that 3-month extension in order to allow us to finalize this RFP and get that out to the market so we can receive some new competitive bids and pricing on that service, as well as permission to use the slightly different liability and indemnification clause in said agreement. I don't know if Ms. Darlington would have anything she would like to add more specifically about that or not. Otherwise, we are here to answer any questions you may have.
Thank you, Jason. Unless Shelley wants to chime in right now, I'm going to go to Councillor Rabbits.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and through you. My question is in regards to Veolia. And Jason, could you refresh this council's memory? Have we had an opportunity for Veolia to make a deputation or presentation to this council, or is this a contractor that, I've had some closed session matters that I feel I'm not at liberty to discuss with this particular vendor. But I was wondering if we've had them come before us. I'm having a hard time recollecting, and is that something that would be atypical of a water supplier such as this?
Through the chair to Councillor Rabbits, to my knowledge, there has not been any kind of presentation or anything of that nature by Veolia in front of this council. They have been operating our wastewater treatment facilities for quite a number of years now, and that contract is just to the point that we just need to put it back out for another fair market analysis, and that's why we're going through this process. And as it relates to the request for extension, that is just sheerly for us to get us through to that point, and they have agreed to a short-term extension while we go through this this purchasing process.
Thank you, Mayor Chop.
Thank you, Councilor Maselli. Jason, what is going on with this? This has been 3 years we've been talking about this. So are these questions, are these questions that can't be answered by staff? Are you just asking for a 3-month extension? It sounds to me what you're saying is you're actually reissuing the RFP now as well, and that's not included in the report. Like, are all the vendors asking the questions? It's just something here it seems strange that it's taking 3 years. With what council's not being told right now is that there have been multiple extensions on this RFP.
Maybe we can transfer this question to Ms. Darlington.
Go ahead, Shelley.
Thank you. Through Chair Shelley to Mayor Chop, if I could assist Mr. Godby. The purpose of this report simply is to request a 3-month extension. The bid has been in the marketplace for some time. There have been several technical questions, like a ton of technical questions from potential bidders that have come in the door that have required response from the technical team in Public Works. In addition, there have been some questions related to the standard agreement that's included in our bid document. It's staff's opinion that the standard agreement should never have been included in, and it should have been a specific agreement for this particular contract. So our attempt here today is just to give us a little bit more time to clean up and answer the questions in the addendum, clean that process up. It's still open in the marketplace. And then we'll be able to close that bid and hopefully bring forward a report to council to award a properly procured contract agreement. And one of the items, as Mr. Godby has indicated, in our marketplace research, as the questions came in, there were some questions regarding the county's indemnification clause. In consultation with external legal and in our review of the marketplace, we are recommending a modification and adjustment to the county's standard indemnification clause to make sure that we get the most bids in the door that we can. So I think that sort of summarizes it. The bid is in the marketplace, lots of technical questions that require a response, and it has caused a little bit of delay, and we just want to make sure that we can get those questions answered, the bid closed properly, and we're just seeking an extension of the existing contract under the same terms and condition for another 3 months. The CAO has requested an additional 2 30-days extensions in the event we have a hiccup, but this contract award will be to council quite shortly.
Go ahead.
I still don't understand, Mr. Chair. Shelley, are we extending? Because I thought it was due to close a couple weeks ago or around now.
Through the chair, sorry to Mayor Chop that I didn't clarify that. Yes, we are extending the closing of the bid. to finish up the remaining addendum questions. So it would just be an extension of the closing date of the bid. And then it will come in for evaluation and then contract award and execution.
And what about for those that have already submitted their bids?
Through the chair, there have been no submissions at this point. They're waiting for the responses to the addendum questions that have been received. And then it will give us sufficient time to have those potential operators come in and bid on the award, bid on the contract.
And I have one more question. Are some of the questions, the technical questions, I'm assuming we haven't had staff working in wastewater operations for quite some time. This hasn't been put out to bid in years. So the members with the technical expertise that we have within Norfolk County are not Norfolk County employees. Is Veolia not providing the answers necessary for the RFP to be completed?
Through the chair to Mayor Chop, I'll have to defer to Mr. Godby. My understanding is those technical questions have been reviewed by the staff that are currently in place in Norfolk County, and they have been providing the, but certainly I'll pass it over to Mr. Godby to answer that question.
Go ahead, Jason.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair, through you, and thank you, Shelley. It's kind of a mixed bag right now. There have been there are staff within Norfolk County who are quite well versed in wastewater treatment matters. So it's been kind of a tag team combination of answering some of those technical questions that have come in. One of the biggest things that we did find through the original RFP that we issued is there were a significant amount more of technical questions than we had originally anticipated about some of the very specific nature of the operation, which has required us to either go and get that information ourselves by visiting the site or dealing with getting some of that information from Veolia themselves.
So that is part of the delay then. All I can say, I mean, I'm actually a little bit embarrassed that this has taken 3 years. We've talked about this from the beginning of this council because I knew this hadn't been RFP'd in years. And I can't, like, I guess the other point for council, how many times have we already extended this now?
Through the Chop, if you just give me a minute, I can pull that. I think there's been 3 extensions on the RFP closing, but I just want to double check that.
If it makes you feel better, I actually have heard rumblings through the industry that they thought the RFP was actually quite well put together from various individuals. So that's why I'm perplexed that for an RFP that people have commented they thought was well put together, that we've had so many extensions here. And if it's Veolia that's not providing some of the information, I find that a little bit frustrating. When it's been 3 years now under this council of asking for this to be put to tender.
And Jason, while we're waiting for Shelley to find that, will you go ahead?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. I guess I just want to be clear that, in my opinion, that Veolia has been nothing but cooperative with us through the whole development of this process. And, you know, the technical questions that we were unable to answer and were required to discuss with them, they were very forthcoming with the information. It wasn't all just based out of one vendor. There was a number of questions that came in. Shelley may correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe it was something in the nature of 80 different questions on the RFP so far. And it was a combination of technical and the legal stuff, which is why we had furthered a review with external legal counsel prior, like I said, prior to executing this multi-year, multi-million-dollar per year agreement. We know it hasn't been done in a long time, and The fact that we're going through it now, we just want to make sure that we've got these things stitched up nice and tight and everything done right prior to going down the road with another long-term contract.
Okay, well, thank you, Mr. Chair. Jason, I mean, that gives me comfort that Veolia is not holding up the process then. That's good to hear. I'm not going to lie, though. I am still concerned that an RFP that some say was quite well put together is still being delayed. You know, the extension has been granted 3 times now. I'm assuming this is the 4th, or it was 2, and this is whichever the case may be. You know, this is dragging on and on and on. So I really hope that this is the last extension on that RFP process that we're looking at.
I believe, Madam Mayor, that Shelley is prepared to give her response, and then I will hear from our CAO.
Thank you, Chair Shelley. Yes, the current extension is on the RFP. It is set to now close on Tuesday, February 23rd. Staff do feel that they are in a position to close it on those deadlines. And Jason, Mr. Godby is correct. There's 83 outstanding questions from multiple bidders on this particular RFP. So we have all of those questions and responses drafted to be issued, and that's why we're seeking the extension on the contract to get this issued and closed in the marketplace. I don't believe there'll be a further extension.
In that case, Mr. Chair, I'd like to move the staff recommendation.
Madam Mayor, I do believe I'm going to give our CAO an opportunity to mention something here.
Sure, I don't want to belabor it, but I'll just suffice it to say that I think there's lots of lessons to be learned on a number of fronts. This contract should have never gone uncompetitively bid for the period it has. I think staff could have learned lessons on how to better prep to put this out into the marketplace. And I think there were some lessons learned in how we approach the market on this. So lots to be learned on this one. I think at the end of the day, we'll get a good result. Just getting there was a little ugly.
Okay, Madam Mayor, before I can accept your motion, Councillor Rabbits did have his hand raised prior to that. Councillor Rabbits.
Thank you, and through you, I believe Mayor Chop had moved staff's recommendation. Is that correct? I'm trying to follow along. Yes. With that, I will second it, and I'd like to speak to it for a first time. I am looking for a staff response, but I'd like to provide some context as to why I'm moving staff's recommendation. In my opinion, it's sort of they're in a really tough position where we've clearly expressed we want to go to tender with this, and they're in a position where they're extending contract after contract and going single source, which we know that does not look good, and that's not the best practice, right? But service, when we're talking about wastewater services here, it's their best recommendation with the resources that we have. So I'm supporting this recommendation. But to staff, I mean, I've had Veolia Water Canada appear in closed and open. We've had several extensions, and it's one of those squeaky wheels in a sense where I've never met this organization. They've been responsible for water service for a long period of time. And frankly, it begs the question, how come, it keeps coming up, and this isn't not a single source request, and we're going to have to take your word, and I do believe you, this will be the last time. But it begs the question if more oversight isn't required on this file with wastewater services. I don't know what an added layer of oversight would look like. But, to some of the mayor's earlier points, it begs the question of accountability. And I feel that, this council's responsibility is when we have sort of that squeaky wheel or that topic conversation keep coming up, that it begs the question that if there isn't something that we could do as a board of directors, of governors, to provide some sort of added level of oversight or accountability so that we don't have a repetition of this. Because, you know, as much as I want to believe that we won't have yet another extension or something, another confounding factor arise, we keep having the same conversation. And so, you know, it begs the question, is there something we should be doing differently?
Thank you, Councillor Rabbit. So we'll let our staff respond to that.
Yeah, I'll through the chair, I'll take first crack at this. And I think Councillor Rabbits raises a good point. You know, we need to get better at contract management here and how material contracts, how their performance is being measured, and that communication to council. So, you know, I think for this contract, and there's a few other contracts, I think we need to do a better job, you know, with the contract management, with the communication up to it. But like I said, we're just trying to get through this RFP process at this point in time, and then we can better manage the contract going forward. But it's an area of improvement we need to undertake.
Jason or Shelley, anything to add?
Yeah, if you don't mind, Mr. Chair, thank you. I guess just on the note, those are all valid points that have been raised, and I guess just one of the things that has been worked into this new contract is significant more increased responsibility for reporting in many areas to the county and to our staff. The level of involvement from staff will be significantly increased compared to what it has been in the past. One of the ways that has been done is over the past couple of years with some of the, you know, beefing up and improvements within our water and wastewater compliance section of our environmental services department. We are living in much more heavily regulated and litigious societies, especially as it goes with water and wastewater operations as a whole. And that is an area that we have put some good people in some good places there to keep an eye on and keep a better handle on our water and wastewater operations as a whole.
Thank you. And Shelley, anything further?
No, thank you very much, Chairman Shelley, for checking again.
Okay, and Mayor Chop, you have your hand raised. Are you just content to let this motion be seconded?
Yes, Mr. Chair, I'd like to call the question.
Okay. Then we will put the motion on the floor. The staff recommendation has been moved. All those in favor? And that is carried. Thank you very much. Our next item is staff report PW 21-09 regarding the continued supply of SCADA operational services and software support by T&T Power Group for 10 additional months. And Mr. Godby, I believe you are on.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. Through you to committee. The purpose of this report is basically to seek council approval for a 10-month extension to the provision of the SCADA operational services and software support by T&T Power Group. Going back pretty much through the history of Norfolk County's SCADA systems that are used in our water and wastewater treatment facilities. We have historically had one vendor that has been our primary go-to for this specialized service. What we are hoping out of this is an extension to the existing contract for 10 months to allow us to go through some of the internalization of some of these services, through some shifting of some internal resources within our environmental services department, we're looking at bringing on a water treatment or a water and wastewater operator type person who knows the systems and their operations inside and out, as well as has the ability to perform a lot of more of this work that we're currently outsourcing, to do that in-house with our own in-house resource. And essentially through that, what we would be expecting is that in the years going forward, it'll have a positive effect on our annual operating budgets by not needing that reliance on a third-party contractor. So currently within the water and wastewater budget areas, we do have line items for contracted services for some of this, and we figure that we could save approximately $60,000 a year out of that contracted services bucket of money by bringing it in and repurposing one of our existing FTEs to do that work in-house for us. So in order for us to get to that point of onboarding this person, we're requesting a 10-month extension to our current agreement with TNT in order for us to go through that recruitment process and hiring, and then come the expiration of this, we would be looking to handle as much of that service in-house as we can for some of the larger items that require bringing in a company like TNT. For items that are completely out of our scope, we would continue to do that through a competitive process. And if there are any questions, I'm happy to answer.
Thank you, Jason. Questions of committee? Councillor Columbus.
Well, it sounds like a good plan to me to improve our efficiency, so I'm going to move the recommendation as printed.
Councillor Taylor, you're seconding. Thank you. Any discussion? Shaw?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Yeah, I'm all for technology, Jason, and our SCADA systems. I'm assuming that 60,000, the operational savings of 60,000, which includes the hiring of an additional person to monitor those operations. Is that going to be coming out of the overtime payments?
Through the chair to the mayor, the savings will mainly be not necessarily from the overtime payments that go to our staff, as much as it is overtime payments and on-call payments that are being made to a third-party contractor. Currently, when we have issues with the SCADA system that require us to have minor changes made or anything like that to the system, we are currently, lack of a better term, we're kind of at the mercy of a third party because we don't have anybody who can do some of the routine stuff in-house. So by bringing it in-house, we're going to cut down on what we're putting out to this third-party contractor.
Okay, let me rephrase that. Are we going to be reducing the number of hours of manual inspections over the weekend hours of, well, obviously it's around the clock, so over the weekends? I think you know what I'm getting at.
Yes, through you, Mr. Chair, to the mayor, I understand what you're saying. Yes, Madam Mayor, the intention and the whole point of a robust SCADA system is to decrease our reliance on having staff in the facilities all the time. So as we have the improvements are made to the SCADA system and these tweaks are made, that the need to have somebody there, say you reference the weekends, that does allow us the opportunity to scale back that weekend presence, that after hours presence that might be required. In order to achieve all of that part, this position becomes one piece of it. The other piece, which is currently working in the background, is just getting that more remote access to the SCADA system, to the operators, so it can be done through, mobile technology, as opposed to, just the classic bell ringing of an alarm and the operator needing to respond directly to the site in order to even have an idea of what is going on. They all kind of tie together to give us that point where they could literally pull on a computer and do what they need to do.
Sorry, Mr. Chair, just one more sort of attempt at this. I guess I'll be more blunt, Jason. I mean, we saw the Walton report, which never made it for public dissemination under previous council. It was a report that was paid for by the Norfolk County taxpayers. It was a Norfolk County employee that went into significant detail in how money could be saved in water operations, yet the report never really saw the light of day. Within that report, one of Mr. Walton's recommendations, specifically, Marlene, your mic is on there, was specifically that, Norfolk County was still monitoring paying overtime, and the overtime became sort of an expectation. We are currently still doing this, to the best of my knowledge. Every Saturday, every Sunday, we're sending crews out to check data manually, as opposed to, relying on the SCADA operations. And even within this report, I thought it was interesting. I think it was Oxford they compared us to and said that we even had more sophisticated SCADA systems. So you're talking about, council often sees, we have reports come forward, let's better our IT. And that's fine, but then there has to be a corresponding savings that goes along with that. The problem with when the SCADA systems were upgraded at Norfolk County, they never changed, the procedures that they had been doing years prior. So at what point do we kind of catch up here on, we upgraded this IT years ago, actually, and yet we've never adjusted our operations to account for modern technologies, which is meant to result in labor savings, and specifically in this case, overtime savings every Saturday and every Sunday, 52 weeks of the year.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair, through you. You are correct that there were a number of those recommendations out of that Walton report. I cannot say right now how quickly that one is being acted on, but I can tell you that working with staff and environmental services and our relatively new Director of Environmental Services and the managers on the water and wastewater section, that we are looking to implement many of those recommendations that came out of that report that had previously not been done. One of them specifically that is being discussed and looked at is that issue of the weekend rounds.
Okay, I believe the report, if I remember correctly, although it's been a year or so since I've looked at it, but I've referenced it enough times also over the last 3 years. I think Mr. Walton stated that the legislative requirement with the SCADA systems was that they needed to actually have a manual inspection. I think it was every 48 hours as opposed to what our current practice. But again, you would know better than I, but it's a pretty significant difference from what we're currently doing. And again, that report has been out for a few years. In fact, I think it was out for a year or so, at least before this council even was elected. So.
Jason, is that everything?
Yeah. Oh, sorry.
I'm just asking. I see that Shelley has her hand raised, but I believe that may be an error. Thank you, Shelley. All right, we have the staff recommendation moved by Councillor Columbus, seconded by Councillor Taylor. Any other discussion? We'll call the vote. All those in favor? And that is carried. Thank you. moving on to staff report PW 21-01, an item deferred from January the 12th regarding the sidewalk options, Cockshut Road and Dover Mills Road in Port Dover. I believe we have a request from Councillor Martin about that particular report. Go ahead, Councillor Martin.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'll just take this opportunity. If I'm successful, I'll save everyone's time, including staff's time, on going through the report. I would like to move for a deferral into the next CIC meeting so we can allow for deputations and emails and correspondence and such to come in on this matter. So if I'm successful, then we can move along and staff won't need to present. And if not, then we'll listen to a presentation.
All right, we have a motion to defer. Do I have a seconder? Councillor Huffman, thank you. Any discussion on the motion before committee?
There's no discussion.
Ian here. I believe there's no discussion on the deferral.
Forgive me, I just thought about that just now. All right, so we have the motion to defer by Councillor Martin, seconded by Councillor Huffman. All those in favor? And that is carried. I'm counting 6-2. The next staff report is CAO 21-04 regarding the community paramedicine and long-term care. I understand that Chief Page will be presenting this report. Chief Page, are you ready?
Thank you, Chair. Through the Chair to Council, this report before you details a proposal that was requested by and has been submitted to the Ministry of Long-Term Care for an expansion to our current community paramedicine program. Our current program is funded totally by the Ministry of Health and the Local Health Integration Network, and this is a new proposal from a different ministry. The new proposal leverages our existing program model, which is including intake, assessments, home visits, remote patient monitoring, and case management. But this one is specifically targeting patients in our community that are waiting for long-term care, either on the wait list for placement, possibly being assessed for placement on that list, or are themselves considering assessment due to changes or challenges of their disease or illness process at home. The proposal we've submitted includes 100% funding for all expanded hours, staff, and supplies for the program. And we do not have final approval from the Ministry of Long-Term Care at this point. So we understand that if they come back with a budget that is less than what we have proposed within the report, we will adjust all the hours and supplies to act within the budget to ensure that we have 100% funding at all times. With that, I'm available for any questions.
Questions of committee, seeing Councillor Martin.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. No questions other than a statement that when you use the word budget amendment in your title, Chief Page, you scared me, but I would be happy to move this recommendation.
The seconder, Councillor Columbus. Any discussion or debate? Councillor Huffman.
Thank you, Chair Michelle. Through you to Chief Page. What are the chances that this funding will be extended past the 2-year time frame?
Currently, the projected, when we submitted the proposal, what we were told from the Ministry of Long-Term Care is that they were extending this to a 3-year program. So it would commence April 1st of 2021 and carry on till 2024. In the past, we have now carried on our community paramedicine program that was once a pilot and has been a pilot several times. So we are assuming that once the 3 years is done, the data is collected, that program will continue on. Okay, if not, we will go back to the normal community paramedicine program that we have.
Okay, thank you very much. Sorry about that. I guess it is 3 years. I'm getting my 2021s and 4s and everything all mixed up. Thanks.
Any other discussion or debate by committee? Seeing none, the staff recommendation has been moved. We'll call that question. All those in favor? That is carried unanimously. Thank you. Next, we have staff report HSS 21-01 regarding Norview Lodge and the LSAA Declaration of Compliance for 2020. I believe Ms. Miranda will be presenting this report. Marlene, whenever you're ready.
Through the chair, Marlene has stepped away. She's en route. I'm just going to, this could have actually been a consent report. It's an annual report filing that we have, that we undertake each year. There's no adverse relationship. There's no adverse matters to report. And it's really just to sign the form that we have to file with the ministry. And the report just asks for the authority for the mayor to sign.
Okay, thank you, Jason. In that event, is there a mover for this staff recommendation? Councillor Huffman, and second, Councillor Taylor. Thank you. Any debate, discussion? Seeing none, we'll call the question. All those in favor? That is carried. Thank you very much. Moving on to staff report HSS 21-02 regarding Social Services Relief Fund Round 2. And I'm not sure, Mr. Burgess, if Marlene is now available to make this report. Please advise.
Hi, Mr. Chair. It's Marlene. I am available, and I'm going to ask Ms. Van Dyke to present the report. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Through you to members of council, the purpose of this staff report is to accept provincial funding for the Social Services Relief Fund in the amount of $1,103,830. This is 100% provincial funding that is flowing through us through the transfer payment agreement for the Community Homelessness Prevention Initiative. In looking at potential projects for this funding, there were a few different options that were considered that are outlined at a high level in the staff report. For the reasons outlined in the report, namely potential future risk of municipal capital requirements, staff have decided and have assessed that the appropriate project to be recommended is to support the addition of a third story at Dogwood Suites, the former Norfolk Inn property. This will add 19 new units of affordable housing to the development and will definitely be of great support to the community. So with that, Mr. Chair, I'd like to thank committee for considering this report this evening, because this is a time-sensitive issue, and I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you very much, Marlene. Questions of committee? Seeing none, do I have a mover of the staff recommendation? Councillor Taylor, seconded by Councillor Huffman. Is there any discussion or debate? Seeing none, we will put this to the vote. All those in favor? And that is carried. Thank you very much. Moving on now to staff report CAO 21-09 regarding the Council Strategic Initiative Fund in the Rogers Communications Incorporated proposal for Universal Broadband Fund. And I understand that Mr. Burgess will be presenting this report.
Yeah, thank you through the chair. I do agree this is a quick report to council on this matter. We had a presentation by Rogers on Friday afternoon as they were applying to the UBF fund. Though what was interesting with this presentation is they're taking a different approach to the UBF fund, and they want blanket coverage of Norfolk County. So that's every underserviced home or business would be hooked up, which is different than some of how other ISPs have looked at this fund, or different than how the SWIFT fund has operated, where they're very distinct projects. Long story short, as part of the application for the UBF, they require municipal support for their application, which normally the direction council's always taken is that the quicker we can get broadband here, the better. And we just normally deal with letters of support as routine business and sign those off. However, because this was a comprehensive presentation to all, or a comprehensive solution for all residents of Norfolk County, we wanted to take maybe an additional, more aggressive step on this application. As you know, Chair Michele, we reached out to you immediately after the presentation once we understood what the magnitude of that was. And one of the questions we did ask Rogers during the presentation is, you know, if it would put us in a better position in the competitive process if we were able to enrich the proposal to the UBF fund. They agreed that that could be supportive of an overall proposal, and therefore staff is making a recommendation for council to consider for this type of proposal, where it's comprehensive in nature, that an additional monetary and non-monetary incentives be added to the project. Since there is since there is going to be a delay on it, council can take a bit more time on that. They could also have deferred the decision originally also, because the key was that we just need to provide the letter of support. In this other stuff, they can always confirm back later. So we can just say that it was before council for such and such a date for a decision. They just can't submit anything subsequent to their application. They can confirm data subsequent, but they can't add new information into their proposal. So I think if council is going to consider this, we could always go back to them to confirm any additional support that this council may give. But we'll be giving the letter of support to Rogers. There's also another provider that's asked for a letter of support for a much smaller project that we are going to be providing in due course. The reason that we put this in, the quantum of it, is there was some logic behind it. One, the $250,000 per year is below what is being levied currently for, or what's being proposed to be levied currently for the 2021 budget for the strategic fund. The $1 million is a significant amount over a 4-year period of time. But I think it's not that big of an amount when you look at the cost to do these types of applications, but it's a large contribution for this county, and it we believe would elevate us in the proposal process. The waiver of permit fees is also a nice contribution to this program, because the quicker we can get people on broadband, the better. So that was that's the summary for the report. I'd be glad to take any questions, and I think now we can sign the letter of support now that this is on the council agenda, and if council approves or amends that support later on, that's something that can be confirmed through their process. And it appears as though the submission now is deferred till March by the fund. They've extended the application process. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much, Jason. I individually have some commentary I will be making on this, but as chair, I will allow my colleagues to have their opportunities first, and we'll begin with Mayor Chop. Mayor Chop, I'm sorry, you're muted.
So sorry. I just wanted to elaborate a little bit on what Jason said for anybody, first of all, that doesn't understand what the Universal Broadband Fund is. So there's 1.75 billion that's up for grabs to bring internet to rural and remote communities. The presentation, Rogers had reached out middle of last week. They sent an email. To be honest, I didn't even know what they were actually referencing. And they had said that they wanted to talk about an application that they were submitting on behalf of Norfolk County. So any provider is eligible, of course, to step up and submit an application if they so desire. What I think needs to be elaborated on a little bit from what Jason had to say, this didn't just blow me away. Like, I practically fell off my chair. This is incredible for Norfolk County. So Rogers is proposing submitting, unlike the SWIFT project, which obviously we had amazing success, particularly because of Rogers, which I thank them for in Waterford, which is why we were able to get an additional project in Norfolk County. But the challenge that, remember, we all saw with Rogers was, well, why did the SWIFT project passed my road and internet didn't come to my house? Well, you're bringing the line down here and you went, right by this location, et cetera, which was the big criticism of that project. This project specifically, and I did, so I was contacted by, her name is Jody Parks, and she's the senior governmental relations manager at Rogers. And she has sent the PowerPoint to us this afternoon. I sent it on to Jason. I'm not sure if he's had a chance yet, but it will go out to all of council. And it really is, it's quite simple. It was just sort of their ask in terms of, we need a letter of support and, obviously additional, if there is additional funding or permits showing a commitment from the municipality. But the biggest slide that you'll want to see, which is a slide of Norfolk County. And on that slide, you will see, she says, these are all the underserved areas, and this is where we're proposing running fiber. And it literally is over the entire county. So they're still figuring that there's about 9,100 homes that are unserviced, that don't have 50 megabytes or greater. So what Rogers is proposing, unlike the SWIFT project, is they are going to run fiber down every single road in Norfolk County if they were to be successful in their application for the UBF fund. Not only are they running it down every single road, but if you've paid attention to these projects in the past, sometimes they often just run to your driveway, and the property owner becomes responsible for running the rest of the line up to their home. In this case, Rogers' application is actually running the fiber right to the doorstep of every single home. So, obviously this is going to be an extremely competitive process. Rogers is not simply submitting an application only for Norfolk County. I asked who else they were submitting an application for. They wouldn't disclose that information. I asked about, they obviously work quite connectedly with SWIFT, and sort of, whether that created any friction between the two. And they said absolutely not. If SWIFT was still to be successful for some components, of their applications that are outstanding, then those portions would be removed from their project through the UBF fund. So I can't express to council enough. Obviously, it was the #1 concern of our Economic Recovery Task Force of bringing internet to rural Norfolk County. And I think COVID has highlighted how critical this is. And I don't think a provider shows up every day with a proposal like this to run fiber down every single street that's not covered in Norfolk County. And that's why, again, until today, the application on their meeting on Friday, which is why we called Councillor Michelli immediately afterwards, was finding out that the application closed on the 15th. It does appear now that the application deadline has been extended to March 15th, but when we talk about a council strategic initiative fund, this is the very thing. I think this is the most critical, not only for kids that are home and doing their schoolwork in rural Norfolk County and don't have enough Wi-Fi to be able to do that, but look at our agricultural operations as well. And I think that has the potential to be a huge selling feature for Norfolk County to be, the lucky recipient of some of this funding or a project of this magnitude. And should council support this and endorse this in terms of waiving permit fees, demonstrating our commitment, providing a financial commitment, again, these are things, Rogers is not saying we have to do this by any stretch of the imagination.